Our top story tonight, the U.S. announcing new tariffs on European nations over Greenland. President Trump said the sanctions start on February 1st and don't stop until the deal is done. Which countries are affected? President Trump talks about a regime change in Iran during an exclusive interview today with Politico, and expert analysis on his next possible moves. Hundreds gathered to oppose China's proposed mega embassy in London over concerns of transnational repression and risks to national security. And in the NFL, the race for the Super Bowl is on as the playoffs continue today, with the weather becoming a factor. NTD's Dave Martin joins us to discuss. And a new exhibition in Florida dives into the work of a famous Dutch painter. The installation gives visitors an opportunity to appreciate his 17th century masterpieces.
This is NTD Evening News, live from our global headquarters in New York City.
Thank you for joining us tonight. I'm Arlene Richards. A fresh wave of tariffs announced today. President Trump said he'll impose new tariffs on 8 countries opposing the U.S.'s plan to acquire Greenland. The tariffs, set at 10% for now, start on February 1st and will impact NATO countries: Denmark, Norway, Sweden, France, Germany, the United Kingdom, the Netherlands, and Finland. Trump says the tariffs, which increased to 25% on June 1st, will be enforced until a deal is reached for the purchase of Greenland. The president has maintained that acquiring Greenland is necessary to protect the Western Hemisphere from Russia and China. Trump said the United States is immediately open to negotiation with Denmark and any country mentioned in the tariff announcement. A development in the Iranian protests. President Trump today called for a change in Iran's leadership. This follows a more conciliatory tone a day earlier, when Trump thanked the regime for canceling the executions of anti-regime protesters. Trump made the remarks to news outlet Politico, saying Iran's supreme leader is guilty of, quote, the complete destruction of the country and the use of violence at levels never seen before. Thousands of anti-regime protesters took to the streets of Iran this week. President Trump voiced support from afar, urging protesters to take over their institutions, saying he would come to the aid and threatening action of the regime if protesters were killed. While Trump has thanked the regime for canceling the executions of some 800 protesters, London-based outlet Iran International reports as many as 12,000 have already been killed. NTD cannot independently verify that number, and other sources cite varying death tolls. Multiple reports say the protests have subsided over the past 2 days. Whether Trump will take any military action against Iran remains unclear. Meanwhile, the State Department's Persian language account said it heard reports that Iran is preparing to target U.S. bases, adding that an attack on U.S. assets would be met with, quote, very powerful force. From tensions in Minnesota, Greenland, and Iran to new health care plans, a major Supreme Court case, and the newly formed Board of Peace, the Trump administration has tackled a wide range of topics. NTD's Daniel Monahan has your White House week in review.
There was another ICE-involved shooting in Minneapolis. The White House says the agent chased an illegal Venezuelan immigrant by car and then on foot when the incident occurred.
3 more of his comrades came rushing out of a house and started ambushing and attacking the ICE agent. They used a shovel or a broom to smash his face in. And so, yes, that agent had to use self-defense and take up his weapon to protect his own life.
DHS Secretary Kristi Noem sent hundreds of more agents to Minnesota this week, while Governor Tim Walz continued to criticize the deployment of federal agents.
If you see these ICE agents in your neighborhood, take out that phone and hit record. Help us create a database of the atrocities against Minnesotans.
FBI and ICE vehicles were broken into and destroyed in Minneapolis. President Trump threatened to invoke the Insurrection Act over the lawlessness. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent says investigators have uncovered schemes far larger than expected in Minnesota, speaking on Blaze TV.
How the hell did this happen? How did it happen? President Trump is outraged. I'm outraged. The American people should be outraged.
Meanwhile, independent journalist Nick Shirley released another video from Minnesota showing alleged fraud in transport companies. The Supreme Court heard two major cases about men playing in women's sports. Attorneys representing trans-identifying athletes refused to define what sex means in reference to Title IX.
I think, frankly, it was quite alarming to not only hear a couple of justices gravel over that basic, fundamental biological fact that men and women are different but inherently equal, but we are certainly different.
President Trump signed a bill this week that allows schools to serve whole milk again, alongside fat-free and low-fat versions. Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. released this video captioned, "When you take that first sip of whole milk." The crisis in Iran continued with thousands of deaths reported. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent had a message for the regime.
U.S. Treasury knows that like rats on a sinking ship, you're frantically wiring funds stolen from Iranian families to banks and financial institutions around the world.
President Trump announced his administration's new health care plan.
We're calling it the Great Health Care Plan. Instead of putting the needs of big corporations and special interests first, our plan finally puts you first and puts more money in your pocket.
Greenland was in the headlines as President Trump has continued to emphasize its need for U.S. security.
I'd love to make a deal with them. It's easier. But one way or the other, we're going to have Greenland.
The Stanley Cup champion Florida Panthers presented President Trump with rings, a stick, and a 47 jersey at the White House.
The 2 cups was pretty good, but that walk with you might have trumped it all there. That was pretty amazing. I know I said it last year, but I mean, nothing beats this. I'm so proud to be an American and so proud to be here with you and everybody else.
Venezuela opposition leader Maria Corina Machado gave President Trump her Nobel Peace Prize medal at a White House meeting on Thursday. Trump called Machado a wonderful woman who has been through so much. And to wrap up, President Trump announced the Board of Peace to oversee Gaza has been formed. The board will be chaired by Trump and oversee a Palestinian technocratic committee tasked with governing the Gaza Strip. Daniel Monahan, NTD News.
And a development to the Gaza Executive Board. The Israeli Prime Minister's office announced on X today that the composition of the board was, quote, not coordinated with Israel and runs contrary to its policy. It added that their foreign affairs minister will contact Secretary of State Marco Rubio about the issue. Busy week on Capitol Hill, where foreign policy took center stage. Lawmakers tackled issues regarding Venezuela, Iran, and Greenland. Our Washington correspondent Luis Eduardo Martinez has the details.
Senate Democratic leadership signaled that they will continue to push for war powers resolutions after failing to limit President Trump's powers to take further military action in Venezuela.
Republicans in the Senate abdicated their responsibility and said, if you want to go to war in South America, go ahead. How does that look?
The other thing we're going to do is this. We're going to be filing a whole lot more war powers resolutions. They can run, but they can't hide. We're going to have votes on all of these, and they're going to have to whip these votes very hard. I know how hard they'll have to whip to get Republicans to support them on the Greenland, Denmark vote. They're going to have to whip that very, very hard.
A bipartisan group of senators met with Venezuelan opposition leader Maria Corina Machado, who confirmed she presented President Donald Trump with the Nobel Peace Prize medal she received last year.
I presented the President of the United States the medal of the Nobel Peace Prize. The people of Bolivar are giving back to the heir of Washington a medal, in this case the medal of the Nobel Peace Prize, as a recognition for his unique commitment with our freedom.
Republican lawmakers have shown their support to the Trump administration in case the White House decides to take military action or other actions against the Iranian regime after more than 12,000 civilians have been reportedly killed in recent protests. Trump administration potentially taking action on Iran amid the protests and thousands of people being killed by the regime there.
Well, I think he's a man of his word, and he said he's going to. I think we're positioning troops and assets, so I expect it sooner rather than later. The brutality that's we're hearing underground coming out of Iran is truly horrific.
Well, I mean, look, we stand in solidarity with the people of Iran who clearly want change after, 50 years of absolute disaster, almost 50 years. And they want freedom. They want to have, the rights recognized. And I think, I'm hopeful that the regime's days are numbered.
Look, I think that we should work with our international partners and exert our leverage and pressure them to stop the violence. I'm glad to see that SpaceX is considering offering Starlink to people in Iran so they have internet access, but we should not be going to war.
Congressman, do you think House Democrats will push for a war powers resolution on the Iran issue and to prevent President Trump from taking any action against the Iranian regime?
We need to have a war powers resolution that covers all of these situations. It is time for the United States Congress to retake its constitutional power and reestablish the balance, right? And don't get me wrong, this is not just about Donald Trump alone. This is a problem that has been 20 years in the making. Republican presidents and Democratic presidents, Republican members of Congress, Democratic members of Congress for decades have allowed the balance of power to be so skewed.
A bipartisan group of 11 lawmakers traveled to Denmark this week amid U.S. tensions with European allies over Greenland.
And part of the point of this trip is to have a bipartisan group of members of Congress listen respectfully to our friends, our trusted allies and partners here in Denmark and from Greenland, and to go back to the United States and share those perspectives so that we can lower the temperature and have a more constructive dialogue about the best path forward. Thank you, Elizabeth.
Lawmakers have less than 2 weeks to finish the appropriations process for fiscal year 2026 or face another government shutdown at the end of the month. Thus far, Congress has passed 6 out of the 12 appropriation bills for fiscal year 2026. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Luis Eduardo Martinez, NTD News.
Coming up, President Trump calls for different leadership in Iran and analysis on what Trump's next move could be. And hundreds gather to oppose China's proposed mega embassy in London over concerns of transnational repression and risk to national security. That and more when we return on NTD News. Protests in Iran appear to have died down for now. Iran International has reported that 12,000 have been killed already, but NTD can't verify that number. Iran's leader has confirmed that thousands have been killed. After giving thanks to the regime for canceling the execution of some 800 protesters, President Trump is now telling Politico that it's time to look for new leadership in Iran. Joining us now is retired U.S. Navy Captain Armin Kurdian. He's also a foreign national and national security analyst. Thank you for joining us, Armin.
Hi, Arlene. Thanks for having me.
Now, what is your reaction to President Trump's message today?
Well, there's a couple of things. These not words that I would have used in terms of the word thank you, but Donald Trump understands human behavior so much better than we tend to believe. Oftentimes, not all the time, but oftentimes he says something which seems a little off the wall. Why would he say that? But it is actually very calculated and very thoughtful in the sense of he understands the impact that his words actually have. Now, more broadly, perhaps it's a sort of a psychological thing to put Iran at ease before he does something else, whether it's kinetic or non-kinetic means. So, I mean, you saw how he was very vocal, very open about we're moving troops out of these bases, we're moving forces into the area. He was very public about it. And the Iranian regime backed down from a lot of these executions. So there is a method to his efforts and the way he actually speaks. So we'll have to see what decisions he actually makes, because ultimately he is not satisfied with the status quo, much like a lot of previous administrations have been.
Well, what benefit would taking down the regime be for Trump's foreign policy goals?
Frankly, it would be a benefit for the entire planet. Basically, the Islamic Revolution of 1978-79 was the greatest foreign policy failure of this country in the post-World War II era. Iran is a thorn in the side not only of the United States and the West and Israel, but most peace-loving nations in the world in terms of what it has exported, in terms of its support for regimes. I mean, look, they're providing drones and military equipment to Russia in exchange for other technology. They're selling oil to China at a discount. So it is definitely in the U.S.'s interest that there be a new regime, but a stable one. And now they don't necessarily have to be very pro-Western. Neutrality is fine, but this religious theocracy, which has exported terrorism and their revolution to other parts of the world, is simply not congruent with a world order of peace and stability. So in that sense, it does serve the U.S. interest to have a new regime. It is much harder said than done.
Now, as you know, the world is watching, and free nations around the world are rooting for the Iranian people, and they want to see if President Trump will help them. But recently, he's commended Iran. So let's watch this clip.
As you know, Iran canceled the hanging of over 800 people. They were going to hang over 800 people yesterday, and I greatly respect the fact that they canceled that.
Now, despite showing some respect there, Trump has said he'd take serious action if the protesters were killed, and they have been. But right now, it looks like he's backed off. So what does the president have to consider before carrying out military intervention in Iran?
Remember the president's comments that he was encouraging protesters, we're with you, we're going to help you. And that really encouraged a lot of Iranian protesters to get in the street. You didn't see that in the previous administration. So he placed himself in a position where there's an expectation of help. You remember when George H.W. Bush showed support for the revolution in Iraq post-Desert Storm, everybody came out, but we didn't actually do anything, and then eventually that revolution was crushed. I would hope that he has recognized this lesson from history. Now, having said that, you don't necessarily need military strikes. In fact, most of the options in terms of military strikes against Iran, I do not believe would have the kind of impact that he wants. So a lot more needs to be done of non-kinetic means, whether it's cyber attack, whether it's psychological operations, information warfare, whether perhaps a singular strike against a particular leader to influence kind of behavior. You've seen that has been able to have an impact around the world without necessarily igniting another conflict there in the Middle East. The rest of the Arab League, even Israel says, maybe don't strike Iran militarily. We think that might have a negative impact. But he's going to have to make some decisions. He is going to have to take some kind of action here because he's basically put himself in a position where he has to do it. If he doesn't, then that could really hurt his international reputation around the world.
Well, as we know, President Trump is a planner if we look at the last strikes that he's conducted. So what exactly do you think it would take for the U.S. to bring the regime down? What would that involve?
It has to be almost 90 to 95% internal. You can't simply take out this religious theocracy through military strikes because it is metastasized. It is a cancer that has permeated the entire country in every aspect of life. So, you could assassinate Khamenei right now and, another cleric would take his place. In fact, it might embolden the actual regime. So the instability has to happen from within. Perhaps if we've cultivated individuals within the Iranian government who perhaps are feeding this information or asking to help, foment some kind of support, allowing, the protests to continue, and then, in some kind of method, this popular uprising, which, might still be violent, but it would be an internal revolution. That has a much greater chance of success, and greater could be a relative term, it could still be relatively small as compared to trying to compel externally. Now, the U.S. can still apply a lot of the pressures that we have been in the past. Plus, you've seen that Donald Trump has now taken the extended action of taking a lot of these shadow fleet tankers off of the ocean. There's about 29 or 30 of these ships left, which they're not really safe to operate. They're uninsured. They're stateless. You start taking more and more of those off of the water, that's fewer and fewer ships that Iran has to sell its oil illicitly. In the volume of oil it needs to sell in order to keep itself afloat, you can't really do that over land, and not in any way, shape, or form, the quantities that are being done. So that is another way, and continued economic pressure, economic hardships could be enough to put the rest of the people over the edge and destabilize the regime from within, and perhaps start something new, and at that point say, hey, with a new government, we're willing to help support and bring Iran back to glory days that it had pre-revolution 1979.
Well, if the administration is successful in implementing serious change in the Iranian leadership, would that negatively impact other adversarial countries like China?
It certainly would. We've seen already the negative impact to Cuba by the actions we took against Maduro, and perhaps stopping the oil flow from Venezuela to Cuba, which is almost wholly dependent on Venezuela for its oil. If China would be able to get oil probably from Russia or somewhere else, perhaps even the United States, maybe even we might sell oil to China in a gesture of goodwill and make some money off of it. But the sale of oil by Iran to its adversaries, number one, first and foremost, helps Iran. Secondarily, it does help some of its adversarial countries, whether it's North Korea or perhaps other countries such as, I think maybe India. They might have been buying oil from Russia as well at a discount. Oil is already very cheap to begin with, so they're having to sell it at like a 5 to 10% discount at like $55 a barrel instead of the $62 that it is right now in order to get these kinds of deals. So it does have an impact on American adversaries. They don't have their own organic source of energy. And that is probably the United States' greatest strength, and it hasn't been leveraged in such I don't necessarily want to say a weapon, but as a force that can actually change behavior around the world in the way that Donald Trump intends to wield it, by improving, expanding natural energy production, but also by expanding nuclear power. By expanding nuclear power, we will have more liquid natural gas and oil and coal to actually export to some friendly nations, so they don't have to buy it from people we don't necessarily like. So one step leads to another, leads to another. He's got another 3 years in office and trying to affect change, and he's going to use every one of those days to try to make as much of a difference on the world stage as he can.
Well, as we know, President Trump doesn't like to show his hand, so I'm sure a lot of people around the world are watching closely to see what his next move's going to be. Armin Kurdian, foreign policy national security analyst, thank you so much for joining us.
Happy Saturday, Arlene.
British politicians and hundreds of protesters gathered to oppose China's proposed mega embassy in London. This would give China its biggest embassy in Europe. But protesters worry about transnational repression and the risk to national security given the site's proximity to sensitive financial data cables. NTD's Malcolm Hudson has more for us from London.
Hundreds of people gather in protest outside Royal Mint Court, the proposed site of a new Chinese mega embassy in London. Now, people are here for two reasons. The first being that last week it was revealed that the Chinese plan to expand basement rooms at this site close to highly sensitive fiber optic cables connecting London's two financial centres. And the second reason being that the Prime Minister Keir Starmer plans to go to China in the coming days, and so we're expecting the decision of whether this embassy will go ahead or not. Protesters held flags and banners chanting "No Mega Embassy." Conservative Party leader Kemi Badenoch called for the British government to stop the proposed mega embassy amid serious concerns about China.
Whether it's spying, disrupting a lot of our services, issues with trade, the harassment of British nationals with connections to China, the harassment of the people of Hong Kong. There is so much that we're concerned about.
The Telegraph newspaper reported that the plans for the site, located near the touristic Tower of London, include 208 secret rooms and a hidden chamber. Critics fear the secret basement rooms could be used to detain dissidents who have fled from the Chinese regime. Hong Kong activist Chloe Chung is based in London and has a $1 million Hong Kong dollar bounty on her head. That's around $130,000. She says she fears for her safety.
Giving China the biggest embassy in Europe is kind of saying that, okay, you can do whatever you want in this country, you can harass people here, you can sanction our MP, we don't care and we're going to give you this embassy. That is the wrong signal to send to the Chinese Communist Party.
Royal Mint Court is also between the financial hubs, the City of London and Canary Wharf. The proposed hidden chamber would be located in close proximity to data cables said to be crucial for financial sector communications. Human rights activist Benedict Rogers said this is deeply concerning.
You can't imagine it's a coincidence that the Chinese apparently are building these rooms right above these cables. It's been reported that they're going to tear down a wall that separates the rooms from the cables, presumably so that they can hack into them. And that seems to me an extremely dangerous situation.
The decision on whether to approve the Chinese embassy plans has been repeatedly pushed back by the government. Ministers have promised to make a decision by January 20th, ahead of Starmer's expected visit to China. Last November, prominent US lawmakers wrote to the British Foreign Secretary urging the UK to deny approval. They said the close proximity to critical communication cables could jeopardize intelligence sharing between the UK, the United States, and other Five Eyes partners. Malcolm Hudson, NTD News, London.
Coming up, in the NFL, the race for the Super Bowl is on as the playoffs continue today, with the weather becoming a factor. NTD's Dave Martin joins us to discuss when we come back. And joint pain is one of the top reasons Americans seek care. A renowned orthopedic surgeon shares what you can do to protect your joints and prevent arthritis when we come back. For your sports news, we're joined by NTD's Dave Martin. Dave, good to see you as always.
Yeah, good to see you, Arlene.
Now, I know we've got college basketball, we've got a little bit of tennis, but let's start with the NFL because they're in the playoffs, and I want to hear more about them. So Buffalo is playing in Denver right now. What's going on?
Broncos are up 20-10 right now early in the third quarter. We had several turnovers there in the first half, really changed the way this game was going. It was like 10-all there late in the second quarter, but Denver got 10 quick points there at the end. So that is one of 4 games on this weekend. Now tonight, 8 p.m., we have the second game. San Francisco 49ers are at the Seattle Seahawks. Seattle definitely hoping to have quarterback Sam Darnold healthy for that one. Darnold is listed as questionable with an oblique injury, very critical for them. Then tomorrow, 2 more games. Houston at New England at 3 p.m. The Texans will look to duplicate that incredible defensive effort that they put on the Pittsburgh Steelers Monday night. Finally, then at 6:30, the LA Rams are at the Chicago Bears. What could be some very wintry conditions. Temperatures forecasted to be in the upper teens, lower 20s, with snow flurries possible. Plenty of wind. They're calling the wind chill should be somewhere below 0 in that one. So that could be quite a game there. That definitely is going to affect how you're going to play that game for sure.
So what do you think could happen here? Could their hands freeze, or what happens when it's so cold like that?
Well, you know, yeah, when your hands get cold, it's harder to grip the ball, for one thing. So you'd expect probably more turnovers, I would think. The passing game is much more difficult. Of course, the quarterback trying to grip the ball and the receivers trying to catch it. It's more difficult. You know, they're going to wear gloves, but it's not the same feeling as your hand, of course. So you would expect more turnovers in the game like that. Plus, the ball, when it gets cold and maybe wet like that, it gets heavier. So it makes for much more difficult conditions. Probably you'll see the teams trying to run the ball a lot more.
So I guess we're going to have the same thing for college football. We've got Duke star quarterback Darren Mensah, though, announcing yesterday that he'll enter the transfer portal. What's unique about this situation?
Well, you know, it puts Duke in a very difficult situation. I'll tell you why. Now, quarterback, it's the most important position in football. It's very difficult to win without a great one. Mensah already announced just about a month ago, December 19th, that he wouldn't be entering the transfer portal and that he would stay with Duke. So Duke's coaching staff, I mean, I'm sure they were likely counting on that. And reportedly, Mensah was signed to a multi-million-dollar contract for next season. That's according to ESPN. Meanwhile, the transfer portal opened on January 2nd. Pretty much most of the great players have already transferred somewhere else, you know, and probably for big money too. So Duke is probably without a top quarterback just as the music is about to stop here. So it really brings up a couple of issues. You know, one is the validity of these contracts they sign. Are they enforceable? You know, if you sign a contract and play in the NFL, I mean, that's it. You're playing for that team. They're enforced. Now, we haven't seen a college team have to actually enforce a contract like this. So it also brings up another issue, tampering. You know, did another school contact him and promise him more money if he re-enters the transfer portal? And if so, is that within the rules? It's not within the rules, I can tell you that, but it's very difficult to enforce. Admittedly, I mean, very few rules are really enforced right now in college football. I think more cases like this could probably force someone's hand, though, so we'll see.
Ooh, lots of legal mumbo jumbo there. But let's shift to tennis. We've got the Australian Open kicking off in just a few hours. Now, this is an event that Novak Djokovic has won more than anyone else. So he hasn't won a major, though, since 2023. So what is he saying about his chances here?
You know, he's realistic. I mean, at this point, you know, when you talk about winning a major, the pathway is definitely through either Jannik Sinner or Carlos Alcaraz, or probably both if you're going to do it. I mean, they've combined to win the last 8 majors. That goes back 2 full years. Sinner, especially his own Djokovic, he's beaten him 5 times in a row. Now, Djokovic has had a little bit more success against Alcaraz. He did beat him a year ago at this tournament. Let's actually listen to what Djokovic said, though, about this.
I'm just, you know, as I said, grateful to have another shot, particularly here, a place where, you know, I won 10 Grand Slam titles and, you know, been consistently playing well and reaching the final stages, and last couple of years also semifinals, 24, semifinals 25. So had a great win against Carlos in quarters last year. So look, you know, I know that when I'm healthy, when I'm, you know, able to put all the pieces of the puzzle together on a given day, I feel like I can beat anybody. And if I don't have that self-belief and confidence in myself, I wouldn't be here definitely sitting and talking to you guys or competing. So I still have the drive, and of course I understand that, you know, Sinner and Alcaraz are, you know, playing on a different level right now from everybody else, and that's a fact. But that doesn't mean that nobody else has a chance. So I like my chances always, you know, in any tournament, particularly here.
You know, Djokovic, he's 38 years old right now. He's still ranked number 4 in the world. He's the only player currently ranked in the top 25 that's even over the age of 29 right now. I mean, that's incredible. That really shows what he's doing at such an age here, and really what him and Nadal and Federer did in their 30s. Pretty much amazing, too. I'd love to see him turn the clock back one more time. This was clearly his best tournament. He won it 10 times, more than anybody else has. So we'll have to see over the next couple weeks here what he can pull off.
Good luck to the old man.
Yeah,
huh?
right?
Wow, 38. Okay, so let's look at college basketball today. We have a number of ranked teams in action. Where do they stand?
Yeah, almost every rank, I think 24 of the top 25 teams are in action. Let's actually look at some scores here. Starting with number 3, UConn, winning at Georgetown 64-62. Huskies now 18-1 on the season. 13th ranked Illinois beat Minnesota 77-67 in a Big Ten battle. And in the ACC, 16th ranked Virginia won at SMU 72-68. Let's look at some more scores here. Kentucky got a much needed win at 24th ranked Tennessee. They won 80-78. Wildcats now just 12-6. Butler went on the road. They beat number 25 Seton Hall 77-66. And in the SEC, 18th ranked Alabama won at Oklahoma 83-81. Let's look at some more scores here. In the Big 12, Cincinnati handed number 2 Iowa State their second straight loss 79-70. Cyclones now 16-2 after that 16-0 start. Very similar situation with 10th ranked Vanderbilt. They lost to number 19 Florida 98-94. Their second straight loss after another 16-0 start. Meanwhile, in the ACC, 22nd ranked Clemson beat Miami 69-59. Let's look at the more scores here. 23rd ranked Utah State lost to Grand Canyon 84-74. And in the Big Ten, number 4 Michigan beat Oregon 81-71. Let's look at some few more scores here. 8th ranked Nebraska beat Northwestern 77-58 in the Big Ten. In the SEC, 17th ranked Arkansas lost at Georgia 90-76. Finally, in the ACC, North Carolina went all the way out to California, losing 84-78. Going on right now, 6th ranked Duke is at Stanford, 5th ranked Purdue is at USC, and number 12 Michigan State is at Washington. Tonight, we got more ranked teams in action. Gonzaga, Louisville, BYU, and Texas Tech all in action. So it's a big day in college basketball, big day in the NFL playoffs for sure.
All right. Well, good luck this weekend. Have fun watching. And we're going to have to end it there. Dave, thanks so much for your update.
Thank you, Arlene.
All right. Pain is the leading reason Americans seek medical care, and joint pain from osteoarthritis is one of the top contributors. Dr. Nicholas Denubali, former team physician and orthopedic consultant for the Philadelphia 76ers and the Pennsylvania Ballet, joined Vital Signs host Brendan Fallon to share insights on preventing arthritis and joint injury. Here's a preview of that episode.
You know, first of all, let's back up. You want to prevent these things in life, right? So, you know, what's the best advice for preventing knee problems? I would say keeping your weight down. Obesity is a direct and indirect cause of osteoarthritis. It directly, because of the weight, it's a mechanical load on your joints, and it absolutely not only causes arthritis, but it will make arthritis progress more rapidly. So if you can keep your weight down throughout your life, great. If you're already overweight and you're having a problem, lose some weight, because even 5 pounds will take significant pressure off the knee, because every pound you carry, your knee reads as 5 to 7. It amplifies, and that works to your favor if you lose weight. If you lose 5 pounds, your knee thinks you lost 30 some pounds. So weight loss is essential. Staying strong. Your thigh muscles, your leg muscles, we all lose those with age if we're not active. So trying to keep your quadriceps and all your leg muscles, all the shock absorbers, your core, your quad, your calves, your hamstrings, they protect the knee. They're your shock absorbers. So keeping your muscle is important.
In my case, because I've had knee surgery, I've had actually had cartilage removed from my left knee.
Your meniscus, probably part of your meniscus. That's a setup.
Yeah. And so I'm cautious about doing things like squats. How do people approach if they have had an injury in the past or they're already getting some arthritis symptoms? How do they approach exercising these leg muscles?
Well, let me back up 1 second. With obesity, I also, there's an indirect cause. The inflammatory side of obesity that creates inflammation throughout your body is not good if you're already developing some arthritis. So keeping the weight down. I was going to say avoiding the knee injury is if you can avoid it. Now, you can't always. You didn't avoid it. I didn't avoid it. I got clipped, you know, playing football as a late teenager, and, you know, that was the beginning of the end of my knee. You probably did something where you tore your meniscus, and that's you're losing part of your internal shock absorption system, and you're more prone. Now, hopefully they didn't remove the whole thing. Nowadays, we remove small pieces, or we repair the meniscus and try to preserve it. But you are more prone. If you've lost some meniscus, you're going to be more prone. You know, you're fit though, you're lean, you're fit, you're strong. Hopefully that works in your favor, and we can go over some other preventive things. But preventing the injury is critical, and we're seeing an explosion of knee injuries, and we can talk about this later, females especially. The ACL tears in females is an epidemic, and it really worries me. When you tear your ACL, if you think a meniscus is bad, tearing your ACL is, even if you get good surgery and repair the ACL, you're guaranteed 10, 20 years later to have arthritis in that knee, even if it's repaired.
Is it people going into, for instance, sporting situations and not knowing how they should be using their bodies, or not warming up, not stretching? Is that a...
Part of it's that, but you know, anybody can tear their ACL, but women are 5 to 7 times more likely than men to tear their ACL. And there's a lot of different reasons for that. The female frame is different than the male frame. Their biomechanics are different.
Where is the ACL?
Hormonal. The knee is a kind of a hinge joint. It doesn't just float all over the place. It has collateral ligaments to prevent side-to-side movement. So when you hear a player gets clipped and they tear their MCL or sprain their MCL, that's one of the inner or outer ligaments, or the LCL on the outer side. The cruciate ligaments are inside the knee, and they go front to back. And if you can picture my finger in there, it prevents that tibia from moving forward. And if that's torn, the tibia jumps, and it's a trick knee. You go to change direction, and it goes out on you, and you're on the ground, and you then sustain more damage to the knee. So boys and girls up until the puberty, if you ask them to jump off a high block, they land identically. Around the age of puberty, women start landing differently. It's the landing gear, and they can retrain that, and there are great programs to prevent ACL tears in females and in males. They don't do it for whatever reason. We can't. It's hard to get coaches and parents to adopt preventive types of things, but you can reduce the risk in females. There's hormonal issues with females at certain times in the month. They're more likely to tear their ACL. Some of it is strength related. Guys have testosterone on board. They build bigger muscles which protect the knees, but there's 4 or 5 reasons why women are more prone. So women who, and with Title IX, there was an explosion of girls playing sports, right? And then there was an explosion of ACL tears, concussions, and women respond differently to ACLs and concussions than men. They're more likely to tear their ACL again after you fix it. And women, girls, teenage soccer players, you're almost guaranteed, sadly, to have another ACL. So these are young people who are, so how are you going to prevent, getting back to your question, how do you've had that trauma, how do you then prevent the arthritis down the line? That's an interesting question. For me, it's again about keeping your weight down, keeping your legs strong. Maybe if you're starting to get some arthritis, avoiding the high impact loading and changing the kinds of things you do in life. Accepting the fact that this is not a high mileage kind of thing. I have to treat this differently, and I can stay fit, I can stay active, but maybe I can't do all the things I've always wanted to do.
To see that full interview and others on how to optimize health, go to ept.ms/vital signs. Vital Signs offers general health information not intended as medical diagnosis or advice. Please consult your doctor before undertaking a new health regimen.
Coming up, schools in Finland are teaching young students how to spot fake news as advancements in artificial intelligence complicate online media. And a new exhibition in Florida dives into the work of a famous Dutch painter. The installation gives visitors an opportunity to appreciate his 17th century masterpieces. We take a look after the break. Schools in Finland are teaching young students how to spot fake news. As Russia's war in Ukraine drags on, the Nordic nation is working to teach children how to distinguish what's true from what's not. NTD's Andrew Thomas has more on how advancements such as artificial intelligence are complicating those efforts.
North of the Finnish capital of Helsinki, children are learning about fake news. Teacher and Vice Principal Vil von Hanen says his students have been studying the topic since the first grade. In a recent class, students were instructed to come up with a list of indicators to look out for when consuming online news.
We've been talking about what the news are, what they include, and then from there on we've just evolved, like going deeper and deeper into things. So now we've been studying about how to recognize if a picture or a video is made by AI.
Finnish children begin learning about the internet in preschool. Helsinki teaching specialist Kia Hakala says learning how to interpret online information is a fundamental part of education.
We think that having good media literacy skills, it's a very big civic skill. It's very important to the nation's safety and to the safety of our democracy. So that's really the whole goal of all of this.
Media literacy has been part of the Finnish curriculum for around 30 years. Still, Education Minister Anders Alderkreutz says educators couldn't have predicted fake news as it exists today.
I don't think we envisioned that the world would look like this, that we would be bombarded with disinformation, that our institutions are challenged, our democracy really challenged through disinformation.
Alderkreutz says media literacy is no longer simply academic. Russia's 2014 invasion of Crimea set off a wave of disinformation, pushing Finland to ramp up its education efforts.
I think initially it was only thought as a basic civic skill that you need to understand media, but now it becomes really a way of trying to protect our democracies.
Finland has a long history of combating propaganda from neighboring Russia. Alderkreutz says Russia's full-scale invasion in 2022 put Finland on the front line.
I think it's fairly obvious that Europe in general is targeted more, and I think it's safe to say that Finland also, as a result of us entering NATO, for example, I think that has changed our position globally.
Last year, Helsinki-based newspaper Helsingin Sanomat collaborated on a new ABC book of media literacy. Every 15-year-old in the country received a copy as they began high school.
And we know from studies that young people tend to get more of their news on social media in Finland as well. So it's really important for us to be seen as a place where you can get information that's been verified, that you can trust.
Russia's war effort in Ukraine has put disinformation front and center in Europe. Martha Turnbull at the Helsinki-based European Center of Excellence for Countering Hybrid Threats says NATO is a primary target.
Certainly around the topic of focusing on anti-NATO agendas is certainly increased since the invasion of Ukraine. But I think generally what we've seen is the information space has become much more polluted over the past few years, and that's a trend that will continue.
Turnbull says developments like artificial intelligence can make fighting disinformation even tougher.
I think it's definitely becoming harder. It already is much harder in the information space to spot what's real and what's not real. It just so happens that right now it's reasonably easy to spot the AI-generated fakes because the quality of them isn't as good as it could be. But as that technology develops, and particularly as we move towards things like agentic AI, I think that's when it could become much more difficult for us to spot.
Andrew Thomas, NTD News.
A new exhibition in Florida is diving into the work of the famous Dutch painter Rembrandt. The installation is offering visitors a rare opportunity to appreciate his 17th century masterpieces and his influence on other artists.
Rembrandt is making a stop in the Sunshine State. His work is on display in Florida as part of Art and Life in Rembrandt's Time, masterpieces from the Leiden collection. One famous work on show is Minerva in Her Study, painted in 1635. But curator J. Rachel Gustafson says the exhibition shows how he influenced other artists. Young Woman seated at a virginal by Johannes Vermeer is one example.
So this exhibit is called Art and Life in Rembrandt's Time, Masterpieces from the Leiden Collection. And essentially what we're looking at here is 76 paintings that span the 17th century, all made by Rembrandt and his contemporaries or even people in his circle that he taught. So you have a few generations, but they all worked and were active in the 17th century in the Netherlands.
27 artists are included in the exhibition. Gustafson explains how Rembrandt's work marked a return to realism.
He's really well known for bringing a formal sense of realism into these compositions, where artists before were much more focused on ideas of idealism or painting the perfect human form. Rembrandt kind of threw that all away and said, I'm going to paint people the way that we see them.
The works by Rembrandt and the other artists featured in the exhibition highlight their technique. Each piece depicts their subject in vivid and realistic detail. Gustafson says the works provide an opportunity for visitors to appreciate talents that came ahead of modern technology.
It's a really transformative experience, and if you're used to perhaps looking at images on a computer screen or on a cell phone screen, this is a place and a moment where you can actually take it in real life and have kind of this portal back in time.
Art and Life in Rembrandt's Time, masterpieces from the Leiden collection, comes amid the 400th anniversary of the Dutch founding of New Amsterdam on the island of Manhattan. The exhibition runs until March 29th. Andrew Thomas, NTD News.
And that's the news for this evening. Thank you for tuning in. I'm Arlene Richards. Good night.